Hey y'all, today is May 12th and we are doing our lesson on 8-9 volume. This is in your packet that you got last week for both surface area and volume. So find this packet, follow along, and take some notes. So let's first start with volume of rectangular prisms, square prisms, and cubes. So first, before we can do that, we need to know what volume is. And volume is the amount of space that a three-dimensional figure takes up. So volume is the amount of space that a 3D figure takes up. So one of these prisms, or even a cylinder takes up. How much space does it take up? So the volume of a prism is the product, and that's a fancy word that just tells us that we're going to be multiplying. So the volume of a prism is the product of the area of the base and the height, like how tall the prism is. How far away are the two identical bases? So that gives us a very general formula. And that general formula is volume equals the area of the base, which we represent as big B, times h, the height. How far away are those two bases? Okay, so volume is the area of the base, we represent that with big B, times the height. How far apart are those two bases? So now that we have gone over that formula, let's look at some examples for rectangular prisms, square prisms, and cubes. So I've got an example of what one of these prisms looks like. So I would say that this is a rectangular prism because I'm looking at this shape down here along the bottom, right? Oops. I don't know why my pen corrected that to a circle, but let's see if I can do a better job. There we go. Now it looks like a rectangle, right? Okay, so that is my base. So the area of the base, I know all I would have to multiply is the length times the width, right? So to find the area of the base, the big B, I would multiply length times width. Well, then once I have this part right here, I'm multiplying that times my height, right? So for a rectangular prism, square prism, or cube, I could actually rewrite my formula so that volume is length times width times height. Because remember, length times width is my big B. That is my area of my base. So I'm actually going to use this formula right here when I find the volume of a rectangular prism, a square prism, or a cube. So now that we have a second formula, let's do some examples together. So for number one, we say, our directions say find the volume of the prism. And it doesn't matter which one I label as my length, my width, and my height. So I'm just going to go in order. I see this one first as I read from left to right. So length, width, height. So volume is going to be 7 times 9 times 6. So I'm just going to go put that into my calculator. So where's my calculator? I'm going to clear all this out. If it will, there we go. So I'm multiplying 7 times 9 times 6, and I get 378. So my volume is 378, and my unit is yards. And because I multiplied yards times yards times yards, it's yards cubed. So that right there is my answer for number 1. Let's see if I can do that answer box a little better. Okay, let's move on to number 2. Again, it's a rectangular prism. It doesn't matter how I label my numbers. So I'm just going to label them as I read them from left to right. So 21 I'm going to say is my length. 3.2 I'm going to say is my width. And 8 I'm going to say is my height. But again, order does not matter. So I know to find the volume, I'm going to multiply length times width times height. Because remember, length times width is the area of the base. That's my big B. Okay? So now I'm just going to plug some numbers in. Volume is 21 times 3.2 times 8. 21 times 3.2 times 8. I'm just going to go put that into my calculator. So we have 21 times 3.2 times 8. And I get 537.6. So the volume is 537.6. And my unit is millimeters. But be very careful here because I multiplied millimeters times millimeters times millimeters. It's millimeters cubed. Okay, let's move on to number 3. So again, right here, I would say that this is a square prism because the bottom, if you look at the base right here, I know as I draw it kind of like that, it looks like a rectangle, but what I notice is that my length and my width are the exact same. So I know that the bottom is a square, that base is a square. So I would say that this right here is a square prism. So I find the volume the exact same way. I multiply length times width to find my area of the base, and then I multiply that times the height. So now I'm just going to plug in some numbers. So 14 for the length times 14 for the width times 31.5 for the height. And now I'm just going to take that to my calculator. So we have 14 times 14 times 31.5. And I get 6,174. So the volume is 6,174. My unit is centimeters, but keep in mind we multiplied centimeters times centimeters times centimeters, so it's centimeters cubed. Okay, last one. Here I have a cube. How do I know it's a cube? Well, all sides are the exact same. So it's a cube. So I can find my volume the exact same way, just multiplying length times width times height. It doesn't matter how you label them. So we know we're going to be multiplying 7 times 7 times 7, right? So we're just going to go put that into our calculator. 7 times 7 times 7 is 343. Now I do want to tell you something. I could have written that as 7 raised to the third power, or 7 with an exponent of 3. And the way I would put that into my calculator is I would hit that 7 button, and we've normally used that A2 button, right? Well, this time I'm going to use that AB button. And it's going to allow me to write 3 as my exponent. So see how I have 7 raised to the third power now, 7 with an exponent of 3? I promise you it's the exact same thing. I get 343 no matter how I put it into my calculator. So we know that the volume of this cube is 343 millimeters cubed. Why is it millimeters cubed? Well, because we multiplied millimeters times millimeters times millimeters. So that's all there is to finding the volume of a rectangular prism, a square prism, or a cube. Now let's move on to a volume of a triangular prism. So the volume of a triangular prism can be found with this formula. Volume is big B times H. Well, hopefully you look at this formula and think that looks familiar because you've already seen it. In fact, you've already written it on your notes. So what I want you to remember is that the big B represents the area of the base, right? So area of the base. And this H, while it represents the height, I want you to think of it as how far away are those two triangular bases. So how far away the two triangles are. Like, what is the distance between those two triangles? Think of it that way, right? Okay, so now let's also talk about real fast, what is the formula for area of a triangle? Because I'm gonna have to find that so that I can figure out what my big B is. So the formula for area of a triangle. So area of a triangle, I want you to remember, is 1/2 times the base of the triangle times the height of the triangle. Okay, 1/2 times the base times the height. So now that we remember that, we can find our big B, we can multiply it by how far apart our triangles are, and we can find the volume of all of these triangular prisms. So let's get started. So our base is right here in front, that triangle right there. So I'm first finding big B, the area of the base. And I know it's going to be 1/2 times the base times the height. Okay, so we have 1/2 times my base, which is 7, times my height, which is this value right there, and that arrow tells me it's 5.5. So I'm going to go put this into my calculator. So we have 1/2, which you can do is 0.5, times the base, which is 7, times 5.5, which was the height, and I get 19.25. Oops, wrong place. There we go. So we get 19.25. Now that's the area of the base. So to find the volume now, I'm going to take that 19.25 and I'm going to multiply it by how far apart our triangles are. And our triangles are this distance apart, 14 meters. So that right there is my height. So 19.25 times 14 will tell me what my volume is. So I'm going to go put that into my calculator. So I'm going to use this little trick where I hit that answer button to get the previous answer and multiply that times 14, and I get 269.5. So my volume is 269.5. What is my unit? Well, it's meters. And because it was meters times meters times meters, meters cubed. Volume will always be cubed. Area is squared. Volume is cubed. Okay, let's move on to number 6. So hopefully this one looks familiar. Our base is this triangle right here in front. So let's find the area of that triangle. So big B, we're using our formula 1/2 times the base of the triangle times the height of the triangle. Well, the base of the triangle is 4 inches. So we have 1/2 times 4. And then the height of the triangle is this part right here. And that arrow tells me it's 2 inches. So I can do this in my head. If you can't do it in your head, please go put it into your calculator. But I know that 1/2 times 4, 1/2 times 4 is 2. So I have 2 times 2, which is 4, right? So now that we know the area of our base, we just need to multiply that times how far apart our two triangles are. So volume is going to be 4, the area of the base, times 1, which is the height. How far apart these triangles are, they're that far apart. 4 times 1 is 4. So volume is 4 inches cubed. Okay, moving on to number 7. So again, we've got a triangular prism, and our base is this triangle right here out in front. Okay, so to find the area of the base first, 1/2 times the base of the triangle times the height of the triangle. So we have 1/2 times, well, 11 right here is my base, times 6 right here, which is the height. Okay, so I can do this in my head. One thing that I know is that 1/2 times 6 is 3. So 3 times 11 is 33. And if you couldn't figure that out in your head, feel free, use a calculator. That is absolutely fine. So now that I know that, I can find my volume. I know it's going to be big B, 33, the area of the base, times how far apart the triangles are, which they are that far apart. They're 8 yards apart, so 33 times 8. We're going to go put that into our calculator. So 33 times 8, we get 264. So the volume of that triangle is 264 yards. What kind of yards? Yards cubed. Okay, last triangle prism example right here. Our base is this triangle right here out in front. And first we have to find the area of that base. So we have to figure out what big B is. So we're using our formula, 1/2 times the base of the triangle times the height of the triangle. So 1/2 times 18, which is the base down here, times 17, which is my height. Okay, now I know that 1/2 times 18, 1/2 times 18 is going to give me 9. 9 times 17, I don't know off the top of my head, so I'm going to go put that into my calculator. So we have 9 times 17, and I get 153. So we have 153. That is the area of our triangle base, right? Now to find the volume, I take that area of the base, 153, and multiply it by how far apart our triangles are. And our triangles are 5 feet apart. So now that I've got that, I'll just put that into my calculator to find our total volume. So I'm going to use this answer button to copy that answer and just hit multiply times 5, and I get 765. So the volume is 765, what? 765 cubic feet. Okay. So that is the end of our notes for triangular prisms. Now we've got to talk about the volume of cylinders. So remember, a cylinder is just like a prism. It just has circular bases. So just like a prism, the volume of a cylinder is the product, that means we're multiplying, right, of the area of the base and the height. In other words, how far apart the two circular bases are. Okay, so don't confuse height. It doesn't have to be if it's standing on or if it's sitting on its bottom circle, right? And then the height goes to the top. It could be flipped on its side, so it could look like they are a distance apart. So think of that height as a distance apart, okay? Now, one thing we know is that area of the base we represent with big B, right? And the height we represent with H. So with that, we can write our formula. We know it's going to be volume is big B times H. Now, we do know that our bases are circles. So to figure out this big B right here, I need to know the area of a circle. So recall that the formula for the area of a circle is A equals pi times the radius squared. A equals pi times the radius squared. And there's that pi again, right here. Every time we see this pi, I want you to use 3.14 to approximate it, okay? So now that we remember this, let's do some examples. We're gonna find the volume of each cylinder. It tells us, reminds us to use 3.14 for pi. So we're starting with the area of the base. we know we're using pi times the radius squared. So it's going to be 3.14 times the radius. Now I need to remember the radius. The radius doesn't go from one edge to the other edge of a circle. It just goes from one edge to the middle of a circle. So when I look at my diagram, I see that I've got a line from the middle, or from the edge to the middle. So that right there is a radius. Oops. That right there is our radius. Okay? So I'm going to use 4 and I'm going to square that. So I'm going to put that into my calculator. So we get 3.14 times 4, hit that A2 button to square it, and I get 50.24. So 50.24 is the area of our base. Now, all we have to do is multiply it by our height, how far apart our bases are, and they are 7 meters apart. So to find the volume, 50.24 times 7. And I'm just going to go put that into my calculator. So I'm going to hit that answer button to copy that answer and then multiply times 7, and I get 351.68. So my volume is 351.68 and it's meters cubed. Okay, let's look at number 10. So number 10, we're still doing the same thing. We're finding our big B first. We're using the area of a circle formula, pi times the radius squared. And so I need to recognize here which one of these numbers is my radius. Well, what I notice is that this right here is my circular base, and that line that's labeled 9 inches goes from the edge to the middle. So that right there is a radius. So we're going to use 3.14 for pi, and then multiply that times 9 squared. So, going back to our calculator, 3.14 times 9, hit that A squared button to square it, and I get 254.34. So, 254.34 is the area of the base. So now that I have that, I can use that to find my volume. I'm just going to take that big B, the area of the base, and multiply it times my height. How far apart are my circles? Well, they are this far apart. So they are 5 inches. That's my height. So now I'm just going to multiply my big B times my height. Use my calculator to do that. So I'm going to hit that answer button and then times 5. And I get 1,271.7. So back here, 1,271.7. And then my unit is inches cubed. Okay. Number 11. So here I've got a cylinder. We've got our radius, and I know I have a radius because this line in the circle goes from the edge to the middle. So that right there is my radius. So with that, I can find the area of the base, pi times the radius squared, right? Well, 3.14 for pi times 2.8, but I need to square that. Now, could I go ahead and say, okay, I'm finding the volume. I know once I have this number, all I do is multiply it by how far apart they are. So could I take that and multiply it by 1.5, which is how far apart these two circles are? Yeah, I certainly could. So that just kind of streamlines my process. So I'm just going to put this into my calculator now. So 3.14 times 2.8, which I have to square, times 1.5. So look at how I write that in my calculator. 3.14 times 2.8. I'm going to hit the A2 button to square that, and then I'm going to multiply again times 1.5. And I get 36.9264, which is my volume. So 36, oops, let's change that back to a pen, 36.9264, and my unit is yards, but it has to be cubed. And the reason I did not round that is because it didn't tell us to round. If I want you to round, I will make sure to include that on directions for a test or a quiz, okay? Number 12. So this one's a little different. How is this one different? Well, not only is this cylinder flipped on its side so that my circles are on the sides instead of on the top and bottom, this time I have this right here. 14 goes from one edge all the way to the other edge. What do I call that? Well, that right there is a diameter. I'm not given a radius here. So if I know my diameter is 14, can I figure out my radius? Yeah, simply it's just half the diameter. So half of 14 is 7, so my radius is 7. And this right here is what I need to find my volume correctly. So be very careful when you see something like number 12. Okay, we're still gonna find it the same way. We're gonna find our volume. We're gonna do this all in one step. We know we start with the area of the base, so pi times the radius squared, right? And then I just multiply that times the height. How far apart are those two circles? So I know that pi is 3.14. I know that my radius is 7, and I'm gonna have to square that. And then I multiply that times how far apart those circles are, which is 16 centimeters, right? So now I'm just gonna go put that into my calculator. So we have 3.14 times 7, because that was my radius. I have to square that, so I hit that A2 button to square it, and then I multiply that times 16. And I get 2,461.76. So the volume is 2,461.76, and it's centimeters cubed. Okay, last one. So number 13 is very similar to number 12. How so? Well, I know that 10 millimeters goes from edge to edge, right? So that right there is a diameter. So the diameter is 10 millimeters. Well, if I know that my diameter is 10, can I figure out my radius? It's just half of that, so it'll be 5. So I need to use this number right here in my formula. So we'll do this one all in one step. So volume is going to be first the area of the base, pi times the radius squared, all times the height. So I know that volume is 3.14, that's my pi, times 5, which I need to square, that's my radius squared, times 4, which is my height. And now I'm just going to put that into my calculator. So we have 3.14 times 5 squared times how far apart those circles are, which is 4, and I get 314. So the volume is 314 millimeters cubed. So that is the end of our notes. Your homework is on the very next page. I believe there are 12 problems for you to complete on your homework. Y'all have a great day.